Welcome to our very first ATMA Country Update webinar, starting off with China. My name is Meng, for those that don't know me, and I will be the moderator for this webinar. This will be a series of regular webinars, giving you a bite-sized 30 minutes update of the mobility landscape in each of the countries. Next up, we will also have Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, India, and Taiwan. We will try to bring you these updates twice a year so that you will always be up to date with the latest changes in these countries from a talent mobility perspective. The webinar will be recorded and the recording will be sent to you by email. It might not be sent to you right after the webinar, so give us a few days to clean it up and send it to you. Please also feel free to ask questions through the Q&A chat box. And so let's just get going. The agenda today is to briefly tell you more about who ATMA is, the foundation, as well as the ATMA launch partners that brought ATMA to life. We then will dive into the actual country updates, starting with Tiffany from Cargill, providing us with an update on the global mobility landscape in China. Then she will hand it over to Antonia from VisaCare, who will specifically cover the immigration updates of China. And I'll then take it over to bring us across the finishing line with updates on cost of living, housing, and education. Okay. So unfortunately, Eva from Cargill, she was having technical difficulties to join. So she might join later. If not, then we will just move on. So for those that don't know ATMA and who ATMA is and why we actually created ATMA, so 40% of the sending and receiving location for mobile employees are today in Asia. More than 40% of companies expect to increase workforce mobility in Asia. But today, we actually have 0 global mobility trade organizations that are in and focused specifically on Asia. So our goal at ATMA is to create the first global mobility trade organization solely focusing on Asia by establishing Asia Talent Mobility Alliance, or short ATMA, a for-nonprofit organization that is today located in Asia, actively supports the talent mobility and relocation community in Asia, and it's all about Asia talent mobility. Our foundation's partners, you can see here 3 logos. A big thanks goes out to Grable, my own employer, ECA International, as well as Reload Network Asia, who are helping us to make ATMA a reality. If you'd like to become a foundation partner, feel free to reach out to any of the launch partners at ATMA that you will see on the next slide, or reach out to me. So we're putting some faces to ATMA. So the ATMA launch committee or launch partners is made from people from the global mobility community, both from in-house HR members as well as members with years of experience on the provider side. I'm sure some of those faces are very familiar to you. What is unique is that each of the launch committee members bring a different set of knowledge and experiences to ATMA, from a cultural to a knowledge perspective that makes ATMA a true representation of talent mobility in Asia. So feel free to reach out to any of our launch committee members or myself if you want to know more about ATMA and how you can become a member as well. Okay, and now I'll hand it over to Tiffany to give us some insights on the HR mobility landscape.
Thank you, Ming. Yeah. So I'm going to share a bit of the observations and market insights regarding the mobility landscape in China. So though it's kind of like a past thing, like with pandemic, but we have to recognize that during the pandemic over the past almost 3 years, there has been challenges for local HRs like HR in MNCs who are managing expatriate populations to retain the expatriates in the country. So many of the organizations, and also including Cargill, we have been losing expatriates because of the pandemic. Not only, the pandemic or restrictions in China, but also the pandemic that is happening in other countries. Like employees would like to go back to the home country or go back to where their family members are based to be together or closer to the family. So and when this kind of request was raised, it would be quite difficult for the company or HR to say, no, you cannot do that. Yeah, that's all because of the pandemic. And now, though we are like post-pandemic, but those kind of issues or challenges that the family or the company has been facing over the past 3 years are still having certain level of implications in retaining or to engage more expatriates to work and live in the country. But with that being said, we could still see, or we have to admit, that China is still an attractive market for talents, like globally. We have seen, like in Cargill, talents are hired from different countries or locations to China, even during the pandemic. And those talents, including foreigners who want to start a career in China, or the returnees from overseas because they also would like to be closer to their family members remain in China. And apart from those personal reasons, China is also showing this attitude to attract more foreign investments. As you have seen over the news in the past few months, once after we opened the board, many CEOs from big MNCs have been visiting China, including the CEO of like P&G, Apple, Benz, and most recently Musk from Tesla. They visited China. They visited senior government officials to set up the relationship, maintain the relationship, and show a strong confidence of better development or future of their businesses in China. So with all those background, talents are still coming in to the market. And when I was talking about the talents, I may not be referring to those traditional expatriates who are like assigned by a company from another country to China. And over the past few years, we have seen this kind of being a trend, also including like in Cargill. The business are trying to reduce the dependency on using expatriates to fulfill the local positions, including some senior leadership positions. The intention is to try to build more local talents, even real local nationals, or also other talents from other markets, but they are open to accept like a local offer or a similar package offered to a traditional local leadership colleague. So those are changes that we have seen, or the trends that we have seen for those inbound expatriates to China. And when we are looking at the outbound from China to other countries, I would say that it's kind of a mix, or sometimes it could be conflict, depending on who's initiating this relocation, like from China to another country, or like what kind of move we are talking about. So from what I can see, people are more willing to move when it is like a short-term assignment, like only for a couple of months to support for a project, or it is like a one-off move, like I directly move from China to, let's say, Singapore. But those kind of like one-way move is more initiated by the employee, because the employee would like to have a better career development, to live in a different country or environment, or even it is part of a family decision to change the focus of the family from China to another country. Well, when the company is trying to engage a local China employee to take an overseas assignment for long-term, say 2 to 3 years, it could be a challenge sometimes for the company to really motivate the employee to take this opportunity, even though it could be like a promotion, a higher level role in the other country. But sometimes, many of the times, the employee may be more concerned about what is going to happen after these 2 or 3 years, and that may be also quite big implication to the whole family, because the employee may not be the only person who's working in the family. It could also impact the spouse. And that usually means taking an overseas assignment for 2 or 3 years or even longer. That will result in a sacrifice of the spouse on a career development. So there will be quite a lot of factors or things to consider before one can really accept a long-term overseas assignment. So these are kind of 2 different group of people that we have seen in the market. And when we consider or think about how to engage more talents, especially when the companies are still trying to assign expatriates to China, the improvements that we would like to see, or we may expect from the local authority, would be that to mainly enhance the quality of living of expatriates or foreigners in the country. For example, we would expect there to be less, administrative burden in terms of immigration application, the lead time of, all the processes, documentation, and also I believe many of the foreigners, expatriates, they've been facing challenges when trying to wire transfer money from China to overseas bank account, and that has to be done like at least physically in person in a local bank with quite many of documents to be prepared in advance to make it successful, and there could be some limitations applied in certain cases. So simplification on this will help to ease the travels of the foreigners to better manage their life financially when they are living in China, and also more financial support and ease of the China PR application. So that is at a certain level connected with the the tax regulations, because we all know that the current beneficial tax regulation, like the tax exemption, those kind of rules are only extended to the end of the year, and we are all kind of waiting for the next decision, whether that is going to be extended again for a certain period of time, or there will be some adjustment on the current tax rules, what will be the final implications to the expatriates, and if those or some of the tax exemption will be removed, then would there be any other method or ways that we could follow to keep some of the tax benefits, or maybe in some other ways to provide a better financial support to the expatriates? And with all those being considered, maybe the foreigners or talents would like to develop their personal and career life in China, would be more keen to apply for a China PR application, which we also hope could be at certain level simplified to make it more attractive and relatively easier for the foreigners to apply for, and for them to stay and live longer in a country and to contribute more. Yeah, that's all from my side, and now I will leave the floor to Antonio. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany. Hi, this is Antonio from VisaCare. Please allow me to share with you some of the immigration update. China, actually, this is such a great growing opportunity that we can see after the pandemic. So basically, China have picked up its pace as the rising star within the regions. And some of you may know that I work in another RMC for many years, for 12 years in another RMC. Some of the information that I can disclose in this webinar is China was always the top 3 locations in Asia Pacific in the past in my previous organizations. And it was even the top Asia Pacific locations in 2018 and 2019. And of course, 2020 onward, we lost 3 years to COVID. So the number is not that accurate. So again, we are every one of you trying to join this webinar, I can imagine that you have certain level of business activity in China. And so I would say that all of us should enjoy the growing opportunity in China, at least in the next 1 or 2 years. In the first quarters of 2023, the number of resident permits issued by the China Immigration Bureau has been increased by approximately around 40% compared with 2022 first quarters. So basically, the Immigration Bureau proceed around 186,000 foreign national resident permit compared with 136,000 in Q1 2022. So all of you may agree with me that it is quite a significant increase year on year. And of course, the good side is we are seeing a lot of people going into China. But of course, Tiffany, you may agree with me that it is very difficult to get an appointment for the China visa applications, China visa appointment slot in some of the location. Like for example, in Singapore particularly, has closed its walk-in application channel, and due to the non-reinstatement of visa-free entry for Singaporean into China, the high application volume, and also the high application volume, the waiting time for booking a China visa appointment in Singapore is extremely long. Previously, walk-in applications were accepted, but the waiting time is extremely long. Some of you may read the news that people are queuing up overnight only for the slot. But even worse, starting from 6th of May, the China Embassy in Singapore has closed the walk-in channel already. And so in return, additional 200 and 250 additional appointment slots are made available each working day. But advanced booking is required, and which is about 4 weeks long now. So not only Singapore, but other locations like Malaysia, Japan, India are almost the same. You will need to have 3 to 4 weeks. You will need to book the appointment 3 to 4 weeks in advance. So that is good, and that is bad for your expat to make the appointment. So make sure that you reserve significant time for the visa applications if you're bringing in any expat into China. On the other hand, I would like to share with you, China has reinstated the validity of APEC card, allowing entry into China as long as the card is still valid. The second one is the multiple entry visa restore, which means actually starting from 15th of March, China has restored the effectiveness of China visa as long as it is still valid. As long as it is still valid, people can go into China with their multiple entry visa. And besides this, China have also resumed the visa on arrival applications, but please remember that the requirement for port visa, we call it the port visa, are very high. So, and also not all urgent itinerary can be approved. So we will strongly recommend that even though this is available, but we will strongly you to consult with your service provider, of course, also with Visa Care for evaluations to make sure that your expat is eligible for this visa on arrival applications. And the last one is we are seeing some visa-free challenge as well. Unlike the other measure, China has not reinstated the 15 days visa-free treatment for citizens from Singapore, Japan, and also Brunei before the pandemic. Many Singaporean and Japanese passport holder may believe that China has already fully reopened. Indeed, except for the visa-free treatment, other visa entry policy has been restored as to the pre-pandemic conditions. The timeline for reinstatement, the visa-free treatment is still uncertain. It is not announced yet, and it is expected to be challenging to reinstall this policy. So anyway, stay tuned with us. We will share this on our WeChat or on our LinkedIn channel. Ming, next slide, please. The next one is talk about the visa-free transit. Of course, we have some not that good news in the previous slide, but we have some good news on the transit visa. So China have already reinstated the 24-hour transit-free policy for all foreign nationals. If they are transiting through any international airport in China, this applies to all nationals. And on the other hand, there is another policy for the particularly for 53 national. The 144-hour transit, which is 6-day transit visa-free policy, is an upgrade from the previous 3 days, 72 hours policy. The details of the 144-hour transit visa-free policy, applicants must be the citizen of 53 countries, including 24 Schengen agreement countries, 15 European countries, 6 American countries, 2 countries, which is Australia and also New Zealand, and 6 in Asia as well. But of course, I'm not going to read through all the countries to board everyone. But this policy, you may want to consult with your airline or also consult with us or with your service provider as well. But no matter what, no matter which is 24 hours or 144 hours, applicants should hold a confirmed ticket with a seat on a connecting flight to another third country within 24 hours or within 144 hours. And also, needless to say that applicants should have no criminal record or should behave themselves during their stay in China, and also have a do not have any violations of any law during their stay in China as well. So this is something from my side on the visa and also immigration side. So may I hand it back to you, Maine, for the rest.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm gonna try to finish in 5 minutes. All the rest now, we can go over time 2-3 minutes. So cost of living. The cost of living information is provided by ECA International, and it's an ATMA Foundation partner. So relative to other locations among the 500 cities surveyed by ECA, Chinese cities have become relatively cheaper in between 2022 and 2023. Relative rankings of Chinese cities to other locations are summarized in the table you see on the slide. Please note that this is only a very small selection of cities that we've published here. The reason for the fall in rankings is twofold. First, the CNY or renminbi has weakened against most major currencies between 2022 and 2023. This makes the price of goods and services in the basket of goods cheaper when converted into a common currency in comparison to 2022. Also, inflation rates in Chinese cities are low relative to other locations worldwide. While many other locations, both in the region and worldwide, have experienced significant rates of inflation in 2022, price changes were relatively small in Chinese cities. So although prices have risen for expatriates in China, for example, Chinese cities are not cheaper in 2023 in comparison to 2022 in absolute terms, they have done so moderately and at a lower rate than in many expatriates' home locations. The consequence has been that Chinese cities are now cheaper relative to other locations than they were in 2022, which is reflected in the lower rankings here in 2023. I think that makes really much sense. And thanks for ECA for providing that data. So let's look at housing. So the housing and schooling data here today is provided by Maxelli, a first and second tier DSP and consulting service provider who supports beyond just first tier cities. And that's where everything makes it a bit more interesting because we get data more than just for first tier cities. So looking back, everyone expected a dip in rental market at the start of COVID, but that really never happened. Returning Chinese have filled the gap of those that departed in the early days of COVID. Moving through the COVID years until today, the market across China has stayed relatively robust. Expat rentals are not really special anymore as they used to be. Often negotiations today are lost due to the local tenants leasing these properties, especially returning Chinese. Landlords are also chasing for the easy money, so they do not prefer a corporate contract, for example. This seems to be especially true on the high-end market, which is anything between 60 to 70 to 80,000 RMB and upwards per month. The market across China is relatively stable, and only a few cities saw a drop in rentals. But let's segment tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities because each has their own dynamics. So in the first tier cities, the market supply for housing stayed relatively the same. Nothing too exciting came into the market as most of the prime locations have seen little changes. What was sought after prior COVID is still very popular today. But if you look at second tier cities, there was a larger shift due to new projects on the market. As an example, we could say Raffles City in Chongqing has shifted the expat market from North Chongqing to Central Chongqing. Because in second tier cities, they are much more prone to these shifts in expat housing. If a new project comes in and creates a larger shift of rental housing from one location to the other. So if you look at third tier cities and beyond, we finally see some quality housing options. Like standard 3 and 4 bedroom apartments fully renovated from the developer are more common than they used to be, which is a good thing, and really conditions are really good. However, the further you go away from first tier cities, the more issues will arise from furniture choices and property management services. So another thing to consider is potentially looking at rental furniture companies, as well as good support from your DSP provider to substitute the property management services. If you look at schooling across China, just like housing, the expat gap has been filled with returning Chinese in the schools. I also see that with our school for our daughter, that a lot of the gaps are filled with returning Chinese. Many of the children qualify for international schools, and there are also children who technically qualify but have never lived overseas. Most schools across China saw a large teacher turnover in 2021 and 2022, and I think everyone that has kids in the international school here in China will know that. This is due to the closed borders and lockdowns. In a way, the lockdowns hit mid-level expats more than high-level expats due to different benefits that were offered to them, such as a home trip or extended home trips. So teachers fall into this category as many of them did not have home trips for an extended period. So many of them made the decision to repatriate or seek school employment in other countries. So we currently see a big gap in teachers or qualified teachers in international school. And we'll see after the summer if the school can attract these teachers back to China, because each of the schools are definitely lacking of qualified teachers. So yes, we are just finishing on time. This brings us really to the end of the webinar, and I want to take this opportunity to open up the floor for questions from the audience. In addition, feel free to reach out to us through WeChat, through LinkedIn. If there's any way, if you don't know any one of us, I make sure that our contact details are shared with the recording together. So we look forward to having you back shortly. There are just a few more questions coming in.
Yes. Lisa asked the questions about Singapore, the walk-in channel. When will it be reinstated? To be honest with you, I hope that I have a crystal ball, but there is no indication when will it be reopening. To be honest with you, I feel like that may be the trend for the next for a short period of time, that people will need to apply that make appointment in advance, apply that online, and the walk-in is not available in any short period of time. I hope I'm wrong, but we don't see that there is any indication about the reopening.
There's another question. Apply if it's difficult to apply for M visa from India now.
Hi, Joy. I may need to get back to you with regard to that, because I don't have that information in front of me. I know about Z visa, but M visa I'm not sure. I need to check with my operation team, and I can get back to you.
There's a question that's quite interesting from Anima. Hi, Tiffany. Is there any new policy in MNCs to encourage expats to work in China?
Yeah, thank you for the question. First of all, I would say the policy for expatriates population in each company could differ quite a lot depending on the culture of the company, the talent strategy, and the actual needs of the business of each company. And in terms of engaging the expatriates to come to China, I would say, apart from policy perspective, it would be more to provide confidence to the employee, to let them and help them believe that either from career perspective or personal life perspective, they will receive sufficient support from the company. And I think as part of a traditional mobility program, there will be like a look and see or familiarization trip before the assignment. And I would encourage the business, also the employee, to take this opportunity to take a look, to do an actual field trip to China to see what is really happening, how the host location looks like, how's everything set up there, to see and feel how it is like, instead of just checking everything online or listen to the news or reading the paper, because it may not be what you are going to experience exactly when you are living in a certain location. So I would say, if from policy perspective we could do anything, I would encourage to be more focused on at the pre-move stage, how to help the family, the Azanian family, to know better and a real situation in China. Yeah.
Thank you. So I answer one question from Ganga, which is, why are landlords reluctant to sign corporate leases? I think local landlords tend to take the easiest way, because a lot of the returning Chinese or locals are able to have an easier lease or kind of a lease agreement, and they also pay in cash without a lot of blow and whistles in terms of protecting the tenant itself. So I think a lot of the landlords are preferring that rather than a corporate lease where you might go through a lawyer to review, and changes to the leases are very difficult to be made. And then that's part of the reason why landlords are just reluctant to sign these. It's just because they have all the offers available. I think once you see a drop in offers, then I'm sure the lender would go back on, take the best offer. If that's a corporate lease, that's okay. But just that's something what we've witnessed over the couple of 2 to 3 years. There are a couple of questions on immigration. If you want to take on, Antonio.
Hi. So one of the question is talk about the longer waiting time booking for visa application. So basically, like let's say Singapore as an example, Singapore need 4 weeks booking in advance in order to book a time slot to go into Singapore, to book into China Embassy in Singapore. For the application. So but of course, I cannot say that every embassy is 4 weeks. But I just take Singapore. I just take China Embassy in Singapore as an example. So different embassy have a different waiting time. Pauline have a questions about. I have one question. You mentioned about the long waiting time to book appointment for visa applications. Are there any longer waiting time to collect documents to prepare an outbound move to the Netherlands as well? So I presume that you are talking about Chinese national going into Netherlands. Am I correct? So I cannot say that right now because it really depends on the it really depends. But in general, that is a longer waiting time for Netherlands for visa appointment in China as well. So in general the process time is very similar, but it is only difficult to get an appointment only. So it's about 10 working days.
I think that's it. Are there any other
Yeah.
questions? If not, then we can conclude the webinar here, and I give you 3 minutes back. And thank you for dialing in. I'm looking forward to having you on the next webinar. We'll be promoting it through various channels, and we look forward to having you online again. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.